Sahaviryam Karavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivastava Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so Shri Tattva Sutra 24. We've gone through sutras 1 through 13. The next two sutras, 14 and 15. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur will describe the idea that the Supreme Personality of Godhead and individual spirit souls are both one and different simultaneously. Sutra 14. Tesham paratvam kechid apare bedham itare tubhayam. Some say the individual souls are the Supreme. Others say the individual souls are different from the Supreme. Still others say the individual souls are both one and different from the Supreme. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments, 3 types of transcendental views are observed regarding the jivas: Dvaita, dualism; Advaita, non-dualism; and Dvaita-advaita, simultaneous oneness and difference. In his purport to Mantra 7 of Śrī Īśopaniṣad, Srila Prabhupada explains that only advanced devotees are able to resolve such seemingly contradictory statements. Quote, except for the Madhyama Adhikari and Uttama Adhikari discussed above, no one can correctly see the spiritual position of a living being. The living entities are qualitatively one with the Supreme Lord, just as the sparks of a fire the great devotee sees oneness in the sense that he sees everything as the energy of the Supreme Lord. Since there is no difference between the energy and the energetic, there is a sense of oneness. Although from the analytical point of view, heat and light are different from fire, there is no meaning to the word fire without heat and light. In synthesis, therefore, heat, light, and fire are the same. So it's almost like a challenge. Can you describe, define, or explain fire without using heat, light, or versions of those words? Because you can't. You can't say, that glowy thing. No, because that's light, glow. You can't say the hot thing because that's heat. You can't describe fire without talking about heat and light. You can try. So that red thing, there's lots of red things. The point is that the heat and the light aren't separate from the fire in that sense. Okay. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues. Different kinds of evidence may be produced to support all these different views. So these different views means these 3, Dvaita, Advaita, or Dvaita-advaita. For example, in the Upanishads it is said, the individual soul is Brahman. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.1 and the Svetashvatara Upanishad 4.6, it is said, the individual spirit soul and the super soul, Supreme Personality of Godhead, are like two friendly birds sitting on the same tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, the sense gratification afforded by the material body. And the other bird, the super soul, is not trying to eat these fruits, but is simply watching his friend. In the Chandogya Upanishad 3.14.1, it is said, this entire world is the Supreme. Therefore, a peaceful and saintly person should devote himself to worshiping the Supreme. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.4, it is said, a sage who understands the Supreme, the life of all that lives, will not speak of anyone but him, capital H, the Supreme. Such a sage has fallen in love with the Supreme Lord. He is eager to hear of the Lord's pastimes. He actively serves the Lord. Such a sage is the best of all transcendentalists. So the idea here is if we truly understand the Supreme, who is the life of all that lives, the source of everything, the cause of all causes, then what is the use of speaking about anything else? Right? He's completeness, he's everything. So what's the use of speaking about anything else or trying to speak of something without its context within him, without referring to him? And then that sage, the one who actually understands this and only speaks of him, he's actually fallen in love with the Supreme Lord, and that's also a natural thing. He is eager to hear of the Lord's pastimes. He actively serves the Lord, and such a sage is the best of all. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues, here someone may say, the conflicting claims of these different philosophies will certainly bewilder the living entity's minds, right? Because one is saying that it's all one is saying, no, it's definitely separate, and the other one is saying, no, it's one and also separate. So someone might say, well, these are conflicting, so this is going to bewilder everyone's mind. Fearing that someone would say this, the author, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur of the Sutras, proceeds to explain that there is no real conflict among these seemingly conflicting views. They are separate aspects of a single philosophy. He says, so this is Sutra 15, Sarvesham samanjasyam sattvata vijnanasya pramatva bhavat pramana sad bhavachcha. All are true, all three of these, because the evidence of Scripture is always true, and because the seeming conflict does not bewilder those who know the truth, right? So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is pointing out that all of them are true because you can find scriptural statements that support all three of these, right? So if you only refer to the one that is supporting the claim that you are holding, that you think is right, then you're not approaching Shastra in the right way. You're only approaching part of Shastra, and you're doing it in a self-centric way because you already have an idea and you're trying to justify it or verify it. But if we understand that all Scripture is always true, then when there is a seeming contradiction or conflict, it just means that we don't quite have the intelligence revealed to us yet to understand how both of those are true at the same time. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments on this sutra. All these sages, all the three different philosophies, are correct because those who know the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and understand that these conflicting views are aspects of a single philosophy are not bewildered. The distinctions observed in these doctrines are only apparent, for these doctrines are always harmonious to each other. But some of the Kanishta followers of great sages raise controversies due to their incomplete understanding. Right. So it's the lower level devotees that make these arguments, right? If one truly knows Shastra, then you're not going to make these arguments that one is right and the other is wrong. You may not understand how they both can coexist, but you won't make that argument, because no one who actually has faith in Shastra is going to say that some other aspect of Shastra is wrong. They may say that someone's misinterpreting it, but if they see a direct quotation from Shastra, and if they have faith in Shastra, they can't say it's wrong. So this would be the Kanishta level of devotees or followers that would be arguing about these things. So since Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying that all three of these are true, he also gave examples in the Shastra how they're all true. But can either of you give an example of how, you can pick one, pick any one of these and tell me why it's true. The jiva is the same as the Supreme, the jiva is separate from the Supreme, the jiva is the same and separate.
Actually, jiva same with Supreme because they same nature.
Okay.
And separate because they individuality. Jiva individuality and Supreme individuality. Jiva cannot lost his individuality.
Okay.
That's why they different.
But can the Supreme Lord? Oh wait, so you did the first one? And the second one? Okay, I got you.
Together, they same because they have same spirit.
Okay, right.
Spirit. And they different because they individuality. Yeah.
But okay, but so the Supreme Lord also has individuality.
Yeah.
So they're the same in that way, but they're different in the sense that they're not the. Okay, I got you.
And third, third point.
You just bring those two together and show how they can simultaneously coexist.
Same. Third point, they have individual conditions of, jiva.
Mm-hmm.
The small part, the
Okay.
Krishna is Vibhu.
So same quality, different quantity.
Yeah. It's jiva, the Anu, the Krishna Vibhu. Vibhu is small.
Yeah, okay.
That's why. That's the spirit and individuality.
Right.
The same, different and non-different.
Right. So they're all right because we are the same as the Supreme Lord. We have the same nature. The other philosophy is right to say that we're different because you can't really compare a spark to a flame, even though they have the same quality. They have heat and light. But, a fire is intense and a spark is, not so much. And then to just bring those two together and understand how they're both right, then that's the other one. Yeah, good. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, chapter 22, verse 4, the Supreme Personality of Godhead declares, all such philosophers spoke under the shelter of my mystic potency, and thus they could say anything without contradicting the truth. End quote. These seemingly contradicting views are correct also because the previously quoted passages of Shruti Shastra, passages that are evident for these different views, must all be correct. In the Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1, it is said, all created beings emanate from the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By his power they remain alive. They attain him at the end. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues, this verse serves as pramana, as proof for all three doctrines. It proves Advaita, since there is no other principle in existence besides Brahman. It establishes dualism as well, because the sentient, which means those who are able to perceive, and non-sentient are real and not false like a dream. It also establishes Dvaita Advaita, because non-dualism is perceived in the beginning and at the end, and dualism is perceived in the middle, right? So we come from the Supreme Lord, so we're the same as him. We end up, when we reawaken our Sanatana Dharma, our eternal consciousness, we're again one with him in the sense that we're of the same mind, we're working together. But in the middle, then there's dualism, because we see ourselves as separate, right? So another way of showing just the separateness, the Dvaita, is to show that the reasons that we're different is that we have the capacity to fall under illusion, whereas the Supreme Lord does not. So that's another way you can establish Dvaita, that we're different. So, yeah, so this one Upanishadic verse actually supports all three. In the introduction to Śrī Īśopaniṣad, Srila Prabhupada explains this same truth. This is the Vedic principle, and we accept it. Vedic principles are accepted as axiomatic truth. Axiomatic means self-evident. Yeah. For there cannot be any mistake. This is acceptance. For instance, in India, cow dung is accepted as pure, and yet cow dung is the stool of an animal. In one place, you'll find the Vedic injunction that if you touch stool, you have to take a bath immediately. But in another place, it is said that the stool of a cow is pure. If you smear cow dung in an impure place, that place becomes pure. With our ordinary sense, we can argue this is contradictory. Actually, it is contradictory from the ordinary point of view, but it is not false, it is fact, right? So it's a good point. If you're just talking about materially speaking, and you have the Vedas, Book of Knowledge, and it says that stool is impure. If you touch it, you have to purify yourself. And then in that same book, it's also saying you can use cow dung, cow stool, to purify a place if it's impure. So you'd say that's contradictory, because if you touch stool, you got to purify yourself. And now you're saying that you can use stool to purify something. Come on now, right? It seems to be contradictory. But we know it's true for many reasons. It's in the Vedas, so we accept it. But there have also been scientific tests that show that cow dung has antiseptic qualities. So some of these things can also be verified, but we accept them on faith, right? So any other stool that you touch, of course, you have to purify yourself. But if it's cow dung, then it's already doing the job. So there are plenty of other things that seem contradictory that will be revealed to us if we are sincere. In his purport to Śrī Īśopaniṣad Mantra 5, Srila Prabhupada writes, "Here is a description of some of the Supreme Lord's transcendental activities executed by his inconceivable potencies. The contradictions given here prove the inconceivable potencies of the Lord. He walks and he does not walk. Ordinarily, if someone can walk, it is illogical to say that he cannot walk. But in reference to God, such a contradiction simply serves to indicate his inconceivable power. With our limited fund of knowledge, we cannot accommodate such contradictions, and therefore we conceive of the Lord in terms of our limited powers of understanding. For example, the impersonalist philosophers of the Mayavad school accept only the Lord's impersonal activities and reject his personal feature. But the members of the Bhagavat school, adopting the perfect conception of the Lord, accept his inconceivable potencies and thus understand that he is both personal and impersonal." So that was Sutra 15. In the next sutra, the general character of the jivas is described. Sutra 16. Vichara raghau chaitana dharmau svarupa pavritti bhavaha. The characteristic nature and the inclination of these sentient beings are cognition and love, respectively. So this means the characteristic nature is cognition, knowledge, ability to think and acquire knowledge. Characteristic nature and the inclination of the living being, sentient beings, means those who can perceive things, is love. So knowledge and love. The characteristic is knowledge and the inclination is love. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, knowledge and love are the characters of the sentient object. Knowledge is described in the following verses. So first, he'll do this half at a time. He'll talk about knowledge and then he'll talk about love. In the Shruti Shastra, it is said, eternity, knowledge, and bliss are part of the soul's nature. In Vedanta Sutra 4.1.3, it is said, the wise know and teach the science of the soul. So both are talking about knowledge. Every object is endowed with two components, intrinsic form and characteristic nature. Intrinsic means naturally occurring. So a naturally occurring form and characteristic nature. The form of the jiva is knowledge, and his nature or inclination is love. The Supreme Lord alone is the object of that love. In the conditioned state of the jiva, this love is applied towards secondary objects of maya. In this regard, Sri Prahlad declares in Vishnu Purana, quote, fools fall in love with what the material senses see. I am not like them. O Supreme Lord, I have fallen in love with you. I always think of you. I pray that you will never leave my heart. End quote. In his conditioned state, the jiva becomes almost perverted due to various material propensities and attains the present condition of the human beings. It's page 27. Oh, you don't have it. In this state, the material mind predominates over the soul. And since the spiritual knowledge is dormant, the sensual experience in the material world is taken to be real knowledge. But there's a great difference between the knowledge of the liberated soul and so-called knowledge of the conditioned soul. The signs of unalloyed knowledge are explained in the Katha Upanishad 2.3.10 and 2.3.6 as follows. When the five senses are peaceful and when the mind and intelligence do not strive for material things, one attains the highest goal of life. This, the wise say. In the course of life, the senses rise and again they set. Aware that he, the soul, is different from the senses, the wise person does not grieve. So this is talking about what spiritual knowledge is, right? So we have material knowledge, that which we acquire through our senses. We sort of observe what things make us happy or comfortable or satisfied, and what things we're averse to. And we basically accept and reject based on those things. How does this thing make me feel, right? But material knowledge is when the five senses are peaceful, so they're not dragging you around, telling you to do this, that, and the other thing. When the mind and intelligence do not strive for material things, right? So the intelligence, which is purified through study of Shastra, understands that we accept things that are favorable to devotional service to Krishna, and we reject things that are not favorable. So the mind and intelligence don't strive for material things. When that's the case, the five senses are peaceful and the mind and intelligence don't strive for material things, that is when one attains the highest goal of life. And that's confirmed by the wise, the great sages, the rishis. And then again, this next one is talking about becoming indifferent to the dictates of the senses. And so the wise person doesn't grieve. This is like Brahmabhuta Prasanatma Nasochiti Nakamshati. That one doesn't desire to have things that he doesn't have, and one doesn't grieve for things that has lost, or things that have been taken away. The love-natured inclination of the soul similarly undergoes perversion in the state of bondage. The following sutra explains this. So is there any question about how knowledge... So we're talking about two symptoms of the soul. One is its characteristic nature, and one is its inclination. The characteristic nature is knowledge, and the inclination is love. So we've gone over knowledge. Are there any questions about that? The difference between material knowledge and spiritual knowledge? Or the symptoms? Pretty cut and dry? Okay. So then we'll move on to love. So knowledge is pretty clear. Love is where it gets interesting. Because, yeah.
This is basically like Chit and Ananda.
I mean, they kind of can coincide, but they do coincide. It doesn't say here explicitly, but you can see how that connection can be easily made. Yeah. So then Sutra 17, we'll find out about love now.
What was the second key?
Second thing?
Characteristic of the soul, knowledge, and the second one.
It's knowledge and love. Knowledge is the characteristic nature. So the nature by which you can characterize the soul, so knowledge. And then the inclination is love. Like what you're inclined to do, what you're driven to pursue. Nature is knowledge, inclination is love. So Sutra 17. Pare nu rakti svabhaviki shreyas kari cha itaresh vaupadiki dukkha pradacha. Love for the Supreme is natural, spiritual, and brings the highest bliss. Love for what is not the Supreme is artificial, material, and brings only suffering. I was about to quote this verse that's just here. I don't have to, because there it is. This is confirmed in Śrī Īśopaniṣad Mantra 13. It is said that one result is obtained by worshipping the Supreme Cause of all causes, and that another result is obtained by worshipping that which is not supreme. All this is heard from the undisturbed authorities who clearly explained it, right? So love for the Supreme is natural, spiritual, and brings the highest bliss. And love for that which is not supreme. So love directed at Krishna, these will be the symptoms: natural, spiritual, and blissful. If you're putting your affection in anything that is not supreme, you'll find that it's artificial, means false, fake. Material means temporary, not eternal, and brings only sufferings. Right? Because even if you're perceiving a momentary state of something that looks a lot like bliss, it can't be maintained, and so the suffering from it being taken away is it's always much greater than the enjoyment you get out of it. And even most of the time when you have the thing and you're feeling blissful, since you know that it's going to be taken away, the stress of it being taken away actually takes away from the enjoyment, right? You have something nice, you buy it, you acquire something new, and you want to make sure that nothing can happen to it. And so you start, locking all your doors and windows and putting, electronic alarm systems on it. And you go to sleep and you dream that you forgot to set the alarm system and someone came in, and you get all stressed out. So you're not even really enjoying the thing because you're so stressed out, because it's temporary, it's going to be gone. So these things, that's why it says brings only sufferings. In his purport to Mantra 7, Srila Prabhupada writes of Śrī Īśopaniṣad, the spiritual entities are meant for enjoyment, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12. Ananda mayobhyasat By nature and constitution, every living being, including the Supreme Lord, and each of his parts and parcels, is meant for eternal enjoyment, right? Eternal enjoyment, not just, periodic states of comfort or happiness like that. This is eternal enjoyment. And that's the nature for all of us, the Supreme Lord and all of the parts and parcels. Because it's the nature spirit, Satchidananda. The living beings who are encaged in the material tabernacle. So tabernacle, does anybody know what tabernacle actually means? So it's really interesting. No, well, kind of. Tabernacle, it's basically a house that's built out of things that are easy to acquire. It's not very sturdy. It can be permanent or temporary. So mostly like a tent or like a pandal type thing. That's what a tabernacle is. So it's such a great word for talking about the human body, because it's, it's there, but it's not going to stay very long. It's not going to withstand so much. So in other words, you don't move into a tabernacle. You hold some sort of event there, and then you pack it up and you move on, like a pandal or a tent. So the living beings who are encaged in the material tabernacle, because we spirit souls were eternal, so even if this body lasts 100 years, it's still, not considered a very good structure, basically, So tabernacle is a perfect word. I heard tabernacle in my youth talking about, because the church would do that. They would travel around and they would set up these basically temporary churches to preach, and then they'd travel, like we do with pandal programs. Same thing. So I always thought a tabernacle was a church, because, they were the churches there then. They would set up the tent church, right? So, because they were talking about the holy tabernacle, right? And so our bodies too can be a holy tabernacle if we invite Krishna in. But yeah, it's such a great word for the material body, because it's there, it's substantial, it serves its purpose, but it's not something that you live in. You move on. So the living beings who are encaged in the material tabernacle are constantly seeking enjoyment, but they are seeking it on the wrong platform. Right? There's that song, looking for love in all the wrong places.
And what's tabernacle?
Oh, we just spent a bit talking about it. That's okay. Who wants to tell Pandavaji what a tabernacle is?
It's a very temporary building, like a tent or a pandal. So you just go there, do something, and then move.
It's not always temporary. It can also be considered permanent, but it's made of like light materials, like bamboo and fabric, like when they set up like that. So it's not something that you would want to, stay in for a very long time. You could set it up and leave it up. Eventually, it'll be taken down by the weather. Apart from the material platform is the spiritual platform, where the Supreme Being enjoys himself with his innumerable associates, right? So that's the platform where we would enjoy spiritual bliss. Here in the material world, encaged in these material tabernacles, we search for bliss, but we can't find it because love for that which is not supreme is artificial, so it's fake, it's material, it's temporary, and it brings only sufferings because you're completely stressed out that it's going to be taken away. On that platform, the spiritual platform, there's no trace of material qualities, and therefore that platform is called nirguna, without qualities. On the nirguna platform, there is never a clash over the object of enjoyment, right? It's not that you're up in the spiritual world and there's only one piece of burfi left, and all of us are still hungry, and so now we're going to fight over it. That's not how it works, right? In the spiritual world, there's no clash over the objects of enjoyment. Everyone's just enjoying, right? Because here in the material world, there are limits. There's limits of time, there's limits of space, there's limits of all these things. But in the spiritual world, that's not there. Everything is plentiful. There's no need to fight because everyone is just serving Krishna. Yes?
Yeah, in the material world, if you get something, nobody else will get it.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
Someone is losing. In the spiritual world, you are getting it, but no problem, the other also will get it.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? So then there's no envy, there's no enmity, there's no greed, there's no need to hoard anything, there's no need to any of that. You just enjoy the relationship. That's it. No stress. You don't have to think, now I have to set up an alarm system to guard my burfi. Because I saw that person already had 5 pieces. And I've only had 2 so far, and there's only 1 left. So I'm just going to, even though I'm not hungry right now, I should take it and lock it up. And then hopefully no one will see me put it there, and no one can figure out my, puzzle lock that I put on it. There's none of that. You don't need it. These are material concepts due to the limits that are here. Here in the material world, there is always there's always a clash between different individual beings, because here the proper center of enjoyment is missed. So today's Thursday, so Tuesday evening, right before we stopped, we had to stop class early. But right before we stopped class, Radhakrishna Prabhu asked a question, and I brought up this I guess it's kind of an analogy. It's a depiction that helps us understand the difference between the material world and the spiritual world, with dots on a page. So I'll say the whole thing now instead of just kind of referring to it and imagining that everybody knew what I was talking about. Does everybody know what I was talking about? Okay, so I'll do it. So one really good way to understand the difference between the spiritual world and the material world, it's a visual way to show someone. If someone comes up to you, they know nothing about spirituality, and they want you to explain it to them in like a minute, right? Because people are impatient. So tell me about your philosophy, but make it quick, right? So the best way I know how to explain spirituality versus materialism to someone in a short amount of time, and it's given here by Srila Prabhupada, is you take 2 pieces of paper the same size, and you put a whole bunch of dots on them, the same. So basically you do it on one and then you photocopy it, so it's the same dots. So both papers are exactly the same. On one of those pages, you also put 1 dot in the center, right? And then you take a compass. You know what a compass is? Not the one that tells you north, south, east, west, but the kind that it's got a pencil on one end and a pointy thing on the other, and you can draw a perfect circle. So on the one that has the dot in the center, you put the pointy bit on that dot, and then each of the other dots, you use the pencil one, and you draw a circle for each of the dots. So you have concentric, I should do it up here. So you have a bunch of concentric circles that come out. And they're all in harmony. None of them are crossing over each other because they're all centered around the center dot. Now on the other paper, it's the same dots, the same exact dots in the same exact position. But you put the pointy bit of the compass on your dot, and then you can adjust it however you want. If you're very humble, you don't claim very much in this material world, you can bring it down very small, because I just want to stick to myself. I don't want to bother anybody. But we know that a lot of people in this world aren't like that. They want a lot. They want everything, right?
Yes.
So some of them, you have that pointy bit on that dot, but you have the pencil pretty far out there. And so you draw circles around each of these dots. And you'll see that there are a whole lot of conflicts. A lot of these circles are overlapping each other. Even some of the circles are inside of a whole nother circle. It happens like that when you do it. And so just visually, when you look at these 2 things, you can't see it because I'm not actually drawing it. Maybe I should have. But you can see that one looks very calm, harmonious. It's just looks very nice. It's peaceful. You look at it and you feel, oh, that's nice. It's in harmony, it's peace. And the other one, it kind of agitates the mind because there's all this conflict, all these overlapping things. And that's what the material world is like, all these overlapping things. Every time one of these circles overlaps, it means you're having a conflict, because something that I'm claiming you're also claiming, and now we're fighting over it, like the burfi, which, by the way, is mine because you already had your share. I just confused Tulsi Prabhu because we actually don't have any burfi. But now we're all thinking maybe we should go get some burfi. But in the spiritual world, since everything is centered around Krishna, there are no conflicts, there are no overlapping circles, right? So here in the material world, we are self-centric. Each of us thinks we are the center, and we have either a small realm of what we consider to be ours, or we have a big realm. Some people, it's just, just me, and I'll stay here in this corner and I won't bother anybody. Other people are like, no, I need at least, some space. You get out of my personal space, right? In New York, you get that a lot, right? Then there are others that extend that even further. If you come anywhere near my family, I will mess you up, right? And then some, it's even broader. My country, right? You don't say anything bad about my country. My country is the best country in the world, right? So you have like that, you have nationalists, and etc. And then you have people that they essentially think they've conquered the world. They're like billionaires that can travel anywhere, they can get anything they want. They have those cards that have no limit, the black ones. They have no limit on it whatsoever, so you could charge like a space shuttle or I don't know, whatever you want, if they sell them. I don't know if they sell those these days, but you just swipe that card because it doesn't have a limit. So there are those people who are substantially greedier than the person who's just trying to stay out of everyone's way in the corner. But the issue is whether your circle is small or big. If you're self-centric, you're still going to have a problem, right? Because you're not seeing things as they are meant to be. So there's going to be conflict always in the material world. Always meant to be conflict. In the spiritual world, it's always in harmony. So that's what it's saying here. Oh, where was it? Yeah, that if our love. So first we were talking about knowledge. So if knowledge is applied to the Supreme, you have the positive results. If it's applied to material nature, you get the negative results. But now we're talking about love. So love for the Supreme, it's natural. So it's not forced. You don't have to, endeavor in an unnatural way. You will put forth effort, obviously, because when you love something, you put the effort. But it's not unnatural. So it's natural. It's spiritual, which means it's eternal, and it brings the highest bliss, right? But if we direct that love, that same affection, to that which is not supreme, then it's artificial, means fake. Material means temporary, and it brings only sufferings. Right? So, material world, spiritual world, harmonic, full of conflict and chaos, right? And so that's what Srila Prabhupada is explaining in this purport, is that here in the material world, there is always a conflict between different individual beings. Why? Because here, material world, the proper center of enjoyment is missed. We think we're the center of enjoyment, right? The real center of enjoyment is the Supreme Lord, who is the center of the sublime and spiritual rasa dance. We are all meant to join him and enjoy life with one transcendental interest and without any clash. That is the highest platform of spiritual interest. And as soon as one realizes this perfect form of oneness, there can be no question of illusion, moha, or lamentation, shoka. Any questions about that? Yes.
I'm thinking that sometimes in the beginning of spiritual life, it may look like for someone that his material life is very much orderly. For one reason or the other, he's used to it and he knows how the things will develop. And actually, spiritual life looks a little bit chaotic and disorganized because he doesn't know what to expect. And suddenly, he started finding out all his anarthas that he even didn't know that they exist, and so on and so on.
So you want me to explain that? Okay. So the question is basically, sometimes we find devotees in the beginning of their, just as they're joining, they seem to have, their material lives seem to be very organized and maybe even harmonic. but their spiritual endeavors seem to be chaotic, right? Good question. Because we do observe this sometimes, right? So sometimes if we're coming from a background, a good pious, good karmic background, then our life is going to go pretty smoothly, right? Depending on how pious we were in the previous life, then maybe our life will go very smoothly, right? There are some people who we meet on the street, they don't have to put forth any effort whatsoever to survive, to be comfortable, to thrive even, right? No effort on their part whatsoever, because they did it in the previous life. So it can look like everything's going quite smoothly, right? And when someone like that is just beginning Krishna consciousness, it can be harder for them to let go of this notion that I'm in control, because their whole life, everything worked according to their own desires. Everything's happening naturally. And so if we don't give up that tendency to have ourselves in the center, it won't work as well as we think it will, right? We see, okay, this is the recipe, you do this, you hear, you chant, you follow some regulative principles, and you do some service, and then we should see some result. But if while doing these things, I still have my previous mentality where everything should go the way I want it to, and so we're doing everything in a very external way, then they don't mesh properly, right? Because spirituality is not about the detail; it's about the principle. Actually, doing something for Krishna. It's about taking yourself out of the center and putting Krishna there. So when we see something like this, we can get confused because, well, it looks like his life is going quite well materially, but then when he's trying to engage in spirituality, it looks chaotic. So the first thing is that we have to understand that their good karma, no matter how good it is, it will come to an end at some point. So it's not a sustainable, it's a tabernacle, right? So he's in the pandal, right? And everything's going well in the pandal for now. But it can't actually last. It's not sustainable. And spirituality, it's not such a cheap thing that if I just, do this, and this, I get the result. Like for that type of person, you tell me what the price is, I give it to you, and then I have it. And there are people who will go to a guru and they'll say, how much do you want? I want the mantra. They buy the mantra from the guru because they want enlightenment. Can you get enlightenment by buying something from a guru? Will a guru actually sell you a mantra? Like a bona fide guru?
Some say so.
Yeah, this is going on, but it's not very effective because that's not the basis of spirituality. The basis of spirituality is that you have to change your consciousness from I'm the center to Krishna is the center. So if you're not doing that, but you're still at least externally trying, it can look chaotic and like it's not working. But the reason it's not working is because we're not doing it right. Right?
And even sometimes it may be working, but we cannot perceive it.
That's also there.
But we're advancing, but spiritual life can be very dynamic. And I don't remember who's giving the example. When you fly in an airplane, then you don't see how fast you fly.
Oh yeah.
You don't perceive, but once you near your destination, then you can perceive.
You see the ground moving very quickly.
Yeah.
Close.
When you take off, you can perceive. When you land, you cannot. But while you are in the air,
It feels like you're floating.
but
Yeah.
it's rather comforting analogy. I hope it is right in our case.
That's good. One way I used to explain the same phenomenon is that the thing about progress is we read about devotional service and then how we can progress, right? And when we start seeing that it's beginning to work, right? So first we read, you go through these steps, and it's a growth. And you start seeing yourself going through these, and then you're imagining, oh, okay, so in no time I'll be, here. And I had a very big property a while back. It was 180 acres. And it had been neglected for a long time. So there were just bushes that were 3 meters tall, right? Just thick brush, like nothing useful. And so we wanted to put cows in the pasture, but you can't put the cows there because it's too thick and it's nasty. So we had to start clearing the land. So you get this on the back of the tractor. They have this big. It's like a mower, but it'll take down trees like that. It's called a bush hog. So we started clearing an area, right? And once you clear an area, you say, okay, I see. This is what the rest of it's going to look like. So as you start doing more of it, it actually seems like nothing's happening. Even though you're covering this area, all you see is all the rest of it that still has to come. And like, why doesn't this look like that? Like I've done the work. So we already know what the whole thing's going to look like. And we sort of expect it to be there. But we still have to continue doing the work in order to get there. So a lot of times we are making advancement, but it feels like we're not because we already know where we're going to get to if we continue. But it's just, we have to keep going through the motions to get to that point. So that's one of the things where we sometimes don't perceive the progress that we're making.
This is a better scenario than when we do perceive the progress, but it's usually progress. So it's better, I think the first one is better. You don't perceive.
Yeah, because that happens too. Essentially, we can be very easily tricked and this was the first bit, because the characteristic nature and inclination. So the characteristic nature was knowledge, cognition, and the characteristic inclination is love. So first we covered knowledge. So if we're cultivating material knowledge, we will be confused and we won't even know that we might think we're getting a result when we're not because we're focused on the wrong thing. So if we properly utilize our characteristic nature of knowledge to only cultivate Vedic knowledge, and then we use our characteristic inclination, which is love, to love that which is supreme, not that which is not, then we'll always not only understand because of the knowledge that we're heading in the right direction, but we'll also experience it through that love. Good? Was that sufficient? Or you still have doubts about that guy who is very materially harmonic and spiritually chaotic? It's okay. It may seem like a cop-out, like I was just trying to logically understand or explain something but we can see that anything material, it's not sustainable. And as long as we have that material mentality where I am the center, spirituality is not going to be going smoothly for us. Simple as that.
That's another thing is that usually if somebody is very organized materially, very aware, very conscious, then he will be also, that's a case also in mind. He will advance very nicely in Krishna consciousness because
if he's able to apply it.
he applies the same principle.
Yeah.
The same principle. So,
but if he's unable to apply it,
then
it can be quite chaotic.
But usually from these people that are quite together advancing, and most of them are quite comfortable because they got this. They are serious as in their material preparation. But I've seen also this type of thing.
Yeah, sometimes you see it. Okay, so then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments on Sutra 17. This is a really good commentary. Love for the Supreme Lord is the natural inclination of the jivas. This natural relationship between the soul and the Lord can be compared with the magnetic attraction of the iron, the burning power of fire, and so forth. Just as the mentioned qualities are closely related to the respective objects, the jivas are naturally related to the Supreme Lord by the tie of love. So just like a magnet is attracted to iron, we jivas have a natural attraction to the Supreme Lord. Material attachments of the embodied soul are the perverted state of divine love. When this faculty of the jiva becomes free of propensities, it shines as divine love. So now Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going to give the difference between actual love and the perverted reflection of love. Love is the only inclination of the soul. So its nature is knowledge and its inclination is love. Only its name changes according to the variation of propensities. For example, attachment for wealth is called greed. Attachment to female beauty is called lust. Here's where it gets really interesting. When the same attachment is manifested to distressed people, it is called kindness. So material kindness is actually a perverted reflection of love. We think that it's actually a good. We think it's the substance. If I'm being kind to someone, then that's a good thing, right? But if in that kindness that, in other words, devotees are also kind. But if the attachment is self-centered and we're manifesting it toward distressed people, like so I can help people, then that's called kindness, and that's actually the shadow, that's not the substance. Continuing, attachment shown towards brothers or sisters is called affection. That's another word that we hold in high regard, affection, kindness. These things, we hold them in high regard. That's what we are. Again, affection can also be used properly, but this is talking about when it's self-centered. And when it is applied toward the benefactor, it is called gratitude. So even being grateful for someone giving you something, that's also a perverted reflection of love, unless we're understanding that Krishna is not even giving it to you, he's allowing you to use it, right? So all of these things. When this inclination is favorably manifested, it is called love. And when it is unfavorably manifested, it is called enmity. In this way, the same single inclination of the jiva is transformed into various forms. So it's all about love. It just takes different forms depending on how we're appreciating something, right? It can be called greed, it can be called lust, it can be called kindness, affection, and enmity. All right.
So this is like different channels through which this inclination so can flow. But it's the same substance, but it flows different direction.
Yeah, different shadow. Like so, just like a prism, you have your pure white light and hits the prism, and then it takes these different shades, colors, and so some we may prefer, and some we may think that's not so good. Because some people think lust is perfect. It's great. Most people think that it's the meaning of life. Pursue it.
The pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And some people call that aspect of greed. Well, that just means that I wanted it more than you, and I worked hard enough to get it, and that's a good quality because now I'm a millionaire, right? So why would that be a problem? And then some would consider the ones that most people would consider good, like kindness and affection. Some people would call those weaknesses. So you're going and helping out people that are in distress. No, you should tell them to help themselves. What, they're not able to take care of themselves? So that's a weakness. You're being weak by trying to help others. And some will say, this affection toward family, it's also just sentimentality. So it's funny how, depending on what your point of view is, some of these can be seen as positive and the other ones can be seen as negative. But actually, they're all negative because they don't have Krishna in the center. pretty far out. This inclination of the soul remains in its unalloyed nature only for the liberated souls, where it can reach infinite excellence. Right? So it's only in its pure form in the spiritual world. Here, we're using it to serve our senses. We can redirect our consciousness here in the material world, and then at the point where we perfect it, then we're in the spiritual world. The activities of the divine love are to discard all material propensities and surrender to the Supreme Lord. Although such love is not possible for the conditioned souls, they have to practice gradual renunciation of all propensities by purest reasoning. If while practicing such renunciation any sins occur, the Lord will graciously absolve the jivas from them. Sins of all types may be called misery. Misery is a result of material propensities, hence the following sutra. So before we get to Sutra 18, are there any questions on the soul's inclination, which is love, and how that can either be properly applied and result in natural spiritual bliss, and when it's not applied properly, it's artificial material and brings only suffering. So example of this kindness means when we have love, but we take this attachment and manifest it to distress people, and it's called kindness. Srila Prabhupada gives an example frequently of people who are kind, but it doesn't do them any good. Anybody know the example I'm referring to? These types of people see people in distress, say they're sick or they're hungry, and so they provide facilities.
Altruist.
Okay, yeah, and what do?
They give food and clothing to the people.
Okay, and why does Srila Prabhupada say that it's not sufficient?
Because it helps only the material needs and not the spiritual needs of the...
Right, and which type of people generally do these things? What did they do prior? Not always, but the example that's given.
Prabhupada often is saying that these are spiritual people who become Mayavadis,
Or Brahmavadis,
who are not active in the material sphere,
yeah.
but at some point they become so much bored in their spiritual life that they come back again to the material sphere of life and they start
Opening hospitals, yeah. So it's things that materially we could say, oh yeah, that's very nice. But if we're not addressing the needs of the soul, which is directing knowledge in its proper place and directing love in its proper place. So these two things both need to be put in their proper place, to the substance, not to shadow. Good.
That was really amazing description of Bhaktivinoda. So it looks like the soul is becoming like obsessed with some kind of relationships or items, like mad after something. And this madness actually has different names.
Yes.
But this is like, it's a reflection of the original madness.
Yeah. So the fact that we perceive value in it, that's not a problem because it does have value. But the fact that we're putting the value in the reflection instead of the actual substance, that's the problem.
So is that means you have to only put all your endeavor and affection to the source of everything, or you can be attached to the objects, but you should be able to be always conscious about their relationship with their object, with Krishna, and also seeing how they get their energy or attractiveness from the source.
So it depends on your point of view. If if we focus our knowledge and our love to Krishna, then automatically all these good qualities will come. We will be kind to others, but it won't be for the same reasons that altruists are kind to others. They're kind to, for material purposes. So from an external point of view, it may seem that, okay, someone might say, for example, if you are actually on a spiritual platform, let's say you are, 100% pure devotee, it's not even a stretch when I'm talking about you, and you're distributing prasadam, right? Someone who knows a little bit of the philosophy and has heard Srila Prabhupada talk about these so-called altruists that are, doing these things and they're feeding people, but they're missing. Someone might say, oh, he's just like one of those fallen spiritualists who are, they're just, feeding people, and they don't understand the whole prasadam aspect and the liberation, right? It can appear to someone from an external point of view that you're doing the same thing as the other one, but your consciousness is different, right? And it doesn't mean that if you open a hospital, you can't be Krishna conscious, right? You could be Krishna conscious and open a hospital. Why not, right? It just means the important factor that we should be assessing in ourselves, not in others, because we can't tell anybody else's consciousness. There might be some indicators, but we can't know. So we use these things for ourselves to see, okay, what's actually motivating me here? Am I selling my car and buying a bicycle because I want to reduce my carbon footprint, and it's just a material motivation, or am I doing it for some other reason, right? Everything we do, we can try to examine our motivation. Am I doing this actually with Krishna as the center, or am I in the center but I'm still appreciating Krishna? And if it's the second one, if you're actually in the center but you're at least appreciating Krishna, then it's not the worst thing in the world, because then at least you have some room to grow. But if you're actually doing it for yourself, but you think you're doing it for Krishna because you haven't properly situated your knowledge, you're just trying to focus on the love part and you haven't properly engaged the knowledge, then, as Pandavaji was pointing out earlier, you can be doing something and thinking you're getting proper good results, like, oh, I'm putting my love in the exact right spot, but it's not, because the knowledge wasn't there. You didn't have enough knowledge to determine that whether or not you were actually using that attribute of love, the inclination of love, in the proper way. Is that?
It's interesting that these two things, like one is the, what is the first one? Inclination and function?
One is characteristic. No, it's both characteristics. It's characteristic nature, so the nature is knowledge, and the inclination is love.
Okay, so it is interesting that these are the two karma and jnana that are taken in the wrong way. One is attachment to knowledge, liberation, the other one is just attached to sanctification. They can be misused. But they originally, they're good things. But it's the soul. And today I came on earth.
Anything else? Okay, so that was Sutra 17. So, sins of all types may be called misery. Misery is a result of material propensities, means, we're misusing them. We're not using them properly in the spiritual propensity. Hence the following sutra. Sutra 18. Upadhi krita hi kleshaha. Afflictions of the jivas arise only due to their secondary affinity to the world. In the purport to mantra 13 of Śrī Īśopaniṣad, it is said, The living being is perpetually suffering in different types of bodies from the material miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. The human form of life offers one a chance to get out of this entanglement simply by reestablishing the lost relationship between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. Love that. What's reestablishing the lost relationship between the living entity and the Supreme Lord? It means understanding proper sambandha and acting accordingly. Then, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary on Sutra 18. In his unconditional state, the jiva has a transcendental blissful form and is engaged in unalloyed devotional service. As soon as the jiva turns away from the Lord, his original pure inclination degrades and becomes attachment to material objects. As a result of this conditioned state, the pure knowledge of the jiva is transformed into material mind, right? So that pure knowledge, which is our characteristic, not inclination, but nature, then becomes perverted. The material attachments of this mind result in the misery of repeated births and deaths due to the fruits of material activities. Thus, all sufferings are caused by the soul's misidentification with the material body. Right? And that's what we were talking about. Was that earlier today? But it was also last one. It's our fault. We try to blame someone else, whether it's God or Satan or material nature. But all sufferings are caused by the soul's misidentification with the material body.
Yes.
It keeps coming up pretty much everywhere. In the Shruti Shastra, it is said, identifying with matter, the soul takes birth in a mother's womb. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 63, the Lord says, when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. In the Śrī-Īśopaniṣad mantra 3, it is said, the killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the world of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues, the word darkness means that the ignorant conditioned souls attain the non-sentient objects of their desire. This leads to misery, which is classified by Srila Rupa Goswami in 3 types. Sin, the root of sin, and ignorance are the 3 causes of suffering. So sin, the root of sin, and ignorance. In the purport to Śrī Īśopaniṣad mantra 1. What's that?
What is the root of sin?
It is avidya.
But now you have 3. The
It says sin, the root of sin, and ignorance.
And ignorance. So ignorance is different from the root.
So the first one, the primordial one, is the avidya. Then we have the sinful inclination in general. And then you have the particular shape that the sinful inclination will take. So sinful reaction, sinful activity. So these are 3 levels.
And Srila Prabhupada just answers that right below.
Clash.
This is actually one of my favorite quotes. I've quoted this since last year because I memorized it. I've quoted this probably 100 times. It's in Srila Prabhupada's purport to mantra 1, right below. The root of sin, if you ask what's the root of sin, is deliberate disobedience of the laws of nature through disregarding the proprietorship of the Lord. That's something that is worth knowing. Because, that's the root of all sin. It's deliberate disobedience. So you're purposely disobeying the laws of nature, God's laws, through disregarding the proprietorship of the Lord. So he doesn't have proprietorship over me. I am a proprietor, so I can do what I want. So the root of sin is turning away, misusing our free will. Disobeying the laws of nature or the order of the Lord brings ruin to a human being. Conversely, one who is sober, who knows the laws of nature, and who is not influenced by unnecessary attachment or aversion, is sure to be recognized by the Lord and thus become eligible to go back to Godhead, back to the eternal home.
Next is moksha. So the different reasons for suffering.
That's okay. Then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues, the material propensities are the misery of the jiva. Destroying these propensities is known as cessation of misfortune, because when these evil propensities are destroyed, the jiva attains his transcendental blissful state. Therefore, the next sutra states, number 19, Anartha nivritir mukti svapada prapakatvat. Because it restores the soul to its original nature, renunciation of materialism brings liberation. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments, there are 5 types of mukti. The general sign of all types of conditioned mentality is the aversion to the Lord. Therefore, all types of mukti are endowed with proximity of the Lord. Right? So all of our conditioned mentality is to turn away from the Lord. Like it said, the root of all sin is deliberate disobedience of the laws of nature through disregarding the proprietorship of the Lord. So material means we're disregarding the Supreme Lord, or we're averse to Him. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is pointing out that we see that since all everything material is based on that aversion to the Lord, so mukti, all of those have something to do with proximity to the Lord, right? Different ones. The essence-seeking disciples of Lord Chaitanya do not need to imagine independent meanings of the word mukti and bhakti. Those who unduly distinguish between them do not have realization of either of them. Does anyone know what that's coming from, aside from you, Mishai? I'll let you answer if nobody else says anything. Anyone know? Mukti and bhakti? Distinguishing between the two.
Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya.
Yeah, what about?
One day he read this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Mukti Pade, and he went to Lord Chaitanya and he said, I don't like that this word is used. And Lord Chaitanya said, why? What's the problem? Like, it's fine. And he said, no, because generally people, they understand mukti by impersonal liberation. So when I see this word, and I cannot tolerate, so we have to change it. And then Lord Chaitanya said, no, it's fine, don't change the, like, Bhagavatam. Just we know that actually the real meaning of mukti means personal liberation.
Yes. Since the state of liberation is not intelligible for the fallen souls, rationalism cannot produce any fruitful result by arguing about this inconceivable stage. Right, so it means no point in arguing about it because we can't perceive it with our senses. If the Supreme Lord is all merciful, why the misfortune has befallen on the jivas? The following sutra answers this doubt, right? And we talked about this before too. Supreme Lord is all merciful, then why are we suffering? Sutra 20. Jivanam itaranu karti hetur ishvara karunyam tata evatesham svatantriya siddhe. The material attachments of the jivas are result from the exercise of their atomic free will, which has been graciously awarded to them by the Supreme Master. Right? So we said that generally people have this argument, if the Supreme Lord is all merciful, then why would he allow such suffering in the material world? And the answer is that it's actually not his fault, it's our fault. We misused our free will. We had these desires to be separate from him. Therefore, here we are in this material world, thinking that we're separate from him, thinking that we are our own independent controllers and enjoyers, thus the two different pages, the concentric circles and the conflicting ones. And so in the material world, nothing can work out harmoniously because everyone's trying to be the center. So essentially, we're mad at ourselves because we don't want suffering, but we brought the suffering upon ourselves, but we want to blame God. So we say he can't be all merciful. But once we understand, who wants to reiterate, because we've done this before? Oh, you've said it. How was Krishna being merciful by? Because Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said it was his mercy. So how is it merciful if it ended up in suffering? Explain. You did it before. You can do it again.
Because he is love everyone. He wants to facilitate all their desires.
Yes.
And it's just provide everything for them just for provide everything for, I don't know how to say.
Okay.
Just another way. If Jivas wants to enjoy and Krishna provides everything for their enjoyment.
Yeah.
That's why Krishna has compassion. If
Okay.
some kids wants how to say, something, the parents give to them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. That's definitely a big aspect of it because we asked for it, so he's being merciful by letting us do it. But some might say that if your kid asks you for a knife, are you going to give him a knife?
No.
Why not?
Okay. Another example. He can give knife, but toy.
A toy knife. Okay.
Maybe not very sharp.
But that's also a good. It's also a good part of it because it's a toy. In other words, or a not sharp knife. It means you have the illusion of it going on, but it's not actually, the kid's not actually in any danger. And in the same way in the material world, although we're psychologically suffering, we're not in any real danger because we can't be cut to pieces, we can't be burned by fire, we cannot waste our life. But still, why would we even have the ability to make a wrong decision? To misuse our free will? Why do we even have it? Anyone?
Because we can be forced to love, so there must be some option.
Yeah, love has absolutely no meaning whatsoever if there's no possibility of not loving. It would just be mechanical. It wouldn't be personal. It wouldn't be relishable. So there has to be this idea of free will. You have to actually choose to love, right? It shouldn't be automatic, because if it's automatic, there's no feeling there. It's just, there's no other option, right? That's no fun. Someone comes to you and they're your friend because there's no other option. Like the last one that's picked on a team. Well, I don't have any other options, so I guess I'm picking this one. That's not love. That's, you're out of options. So that's not love. So we have to have free will. But when we foolish, rebellious living entities misuse our free will and decide, hey, maybe I could be the center. Maybe I could be like that. Krishna puts us in this situation where we can experience that. And although, like I said, psychologically we're suffering, we feel like we're going through so much stuff, we're actually fine. Nothing's going on with us in the grand scheme of things. The soul is properly situated. And once this is a strange term, come to our senses, but let's say come to our transcendental senses and realize, okay, I'm not the center. I'm just a portion of the whole, and therefore we redirect our consciousness from self-centric to God-centric. Then we can actually get out of this suffering. But otherwise, in the material world, there's only suffering. And the reason is because of us, right? This is coming up, but the other one was, all sufferings are caused by the soul's misidentification with the material body. So then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he'll comment, and this is great too. The conditioned souls suffer because of their material attachments. Why does the all-merciful Lord allow these sufferings? The Supreme Lord has endowed the souls with a certain amount of free will for their benefit. He cannot be blamed for their suffering, right? Entering with the individual soul, I will create the name and form. Because he's always there with us. He's making sure that nothing truly bad can happen. He never leaves our side, even though we demanded that he let us go, right? And we gave the example of the father helping the child on the bike, and the kid thinks he's doing everything, but actually it's the father. So in a similar way, Krishna is just sort of hiding behind the scenes and making sure everything goes, okay. Until we realize, okay, yeah, this is foolish. There's no way I'm the controller or the enjoyer. I can't even control anything. So, yeah. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.10, it is said, a person who is pure in heart attains whatever he desires. He enters whatever world he desires. A person who desires auspiciousness should worship such a self-realized soul. Also in the Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.2, it is said, one who desires material things is born again to fulfill his desires. A person who attains the Supreme finds that all his desires are fulfilled. All his material desires disappear. Right? So automatically, when we bring our natural, I keep forgetting the other word, our characteristic nature and our characteristic inclination. So when we bring that knowledge in line with the Supreme, and then we bring that love in line with the Supreme, then all of these material desires disappear. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:16-34, the Nagapatnis say to Lord Krishna, what you have done here is actually mercy for us, since the punishment you give to the wicked certainly drives away all their contamination. Indeed, because this conditioned soul, our husband, is so sinful that he has assumed the body of the serpent, your anger toward him is obviously to be understood as your mercy. And that is the end of chapter 2 of Śrī Tattva Sutra. And I think we have just enough time to read the summary of chapter 2. That way, tomorrow we can begin chapter 3. So, summary of chapter 2. Chapter 2 of Śrī Tattva Sutra pertains to the second topic of the Upanishads, the nature of the soul and its relation to Brahman. So, the individual living entities are eternally subordinate to the Supreme Lord Krishna and are subject to his rules. These individual souls are eternal, beginningless, and endless beings, part and parcels of the Jiva Shakti of Sri Krishna. Although constitutionally conscious and blissful, the living entities are certainly different from the Supreme Living Entity, Sri Krishna. The seers of truth have established 3 views regarding the living entity and the Supreme Lord, namely oneness, difference, and simultaneous oneness and difference. Which one's correct?
Simultaneous.
Just that one? Huh?
You can see that.
Just that one though? Of those 3, well, you weren't here for the beginning, so you have an unfair disadvantage. Which one was right? Of the 3, just oneness, just, huh?
Basically
All 3, yeah. All 3 are right. Because you have the aspect of oneness, and you have the aspect of dualism, and then you have the aspect of simultaneous oneness and difference, right? There cannot be a mistake in the scientific evidence of transcendental revelation, so all these 3 views are in complete agreement. The constitutional nature and character of the living entity is transcendental knowledge and love. Love of Godhead is the natural and auspicious function of the living entity. When that love is directed towards objects of material existence, it becomes the source of all miseries. Miseries arise from attachments to material existence. The material attachments of the living entities result from their minute independence awarded to them by the mercy of Sri Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Cessation of unwanted miseries brings one to the platform of liberation, where the constitutional position as servant of Krishna is realized. So we understood that the individual living entities are eternally subordinate to the Lord, and we're subject to his rules. We're eternal, parts and parcels of Krishna. We're conscious and blissful living entities in our pure state, but we're not the same as, so those qualities we have the same as Krishna, but we're different in quantity. We are, in one sense, one with Krishna. We have the same nature. In another sense, we're different because we have the tendency or the capacity to fall into illusion where he does not. We're also simultaneously one and different because we have the same qualities but in different quantity. So a spark and a fire, they're both the same but different from one another. All three of these understandings are correct. Our constitutional nature is knowledge, our character, and tendency is love. When we invest that knowledge and love in material things, it's the cause of temporariness, of suffering, and of falseness. And when we appropriately assign or guide our knowledge and our love, then the result is eternality, bliss. How's it going? Did I go back too far? Natural, spiritual, and the highest bliss. Yeah. Okay. So that's the summary. Any questions on chapter 2? Okay. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Śrī Tātva Sūtra ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Hare.